Hey everyone, it is Tony Will. I am so excited with another fantastic guest for Women In today. But before you find out about who my guest is, let me tell you what you're listening to. Women In is a podcast that celebrates women in all walks of life and the people in their lives who are lifting them up. You're going to hear from an amazing woman in my life, and she's going to share her story to inspire others to support all their extraordinary women around them. This is a space to be disruptive, forward-thinking, and change agents for humankind. It is uncensored, fun, and curiosity-driven. This is what I'm passionate about, breaking down barriers for my kids' generation. It's equal parts about my guests and the places we came into each other's lives, whether it be the Kalamazoo Wings, Mindfulness Elevated, Tony Will Coaching, or you happen to be in my family and friends circle. My guest today is Jill Terwilliger. Jill, did I say it right?
Terwilliger.
So I got close, but I still slaughtered it. So thank you for correcting me. Jill is an independent grief and change coach at Anbau Coaching and a hospice grief support counselor. She works with individuals and small groups offering tailored grief support and partners with organizations to provide grief education and workshops. In 2024, Jill presented her talk, Befriending Grief, at TEDx Kalamazoo. Jill's work draws on rich tapestry of experience, including roles as a mental health advocate, parish minister, hospice chaplain, restorative justice facilitator and trainer, mentoring matchmaker, and artist. Her personal journey with grief began at age 19 when she lost her father, a profound experience that shaped her capacity to support others through the process of death, dying, and mourning. Since then, she's learned that grief can come with any change, like moving, divorce, or changing careers. Though her family jokes that she can find the dark side of any topic, Jill sees befriending grief as the wellspring of deep joy and connection. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Tony.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. I'm always excited. I keep saying I need to find a thesaurus and change my words up, but to have you on the podcast, because as your really impressive bio points out, we're going to spend a lot of time on this topic today, which is grief. So thanks for taking time to talk with me today.
Very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. Listen, this is what I love. I love podcasting for a lot of reasons, but the main reason actually is to spend one-on-one time getting to know people. And it's just a conversation that happens to be recorded. So that's all that it is.
Awesome.
So I ask the same question to all my guests, the first one, and then who knows where it goes.
All right.
So tell everyone how we met.
We met at TEDx Kalamazoo. We were both doing TED Talks, and what an amazing experience it was. And I went before you, which means I was totally relaxed by the time you were on the stage.
Yeah. Well, you went before me in rehearsal too. Because I watched.
Oh, right before. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really resonated with your story about being alcohol free, and that one of the things I appreciated so much about that is removing our analysis of like how alcohol is working in our lives from the word addiction, because there's just a lot of weight around that word, and alcohol can still be really disruptive.
Yes.
Whether we're addicted or not. And I think it just opens up the door for people to say, I don't know about this. I might be better off if I wasn't using this.
Exactly. Well, I think people are scared of the word addiction, but
exactly.
I'm not scared of it, but not anymore because I talk about it so openly. But I also think like everyone's addicted to something. So I'm going to use something pretty benign here, but and I'm holding up my cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
I would, I'm not going to say everyone because I don't like to use definitives, but most people carry this around, don't go anywhere. If it gets lost, I would have a meltdown. Do you know what I mean? Like
a couple weeks ago, I went somewhere. I had to set all my things down. And when I picked them up to leave, I left both my personal phone and my work phone on the table, and I came home. And I was like, oh, well, I was going to go back past that place about 4 hours later. So I decided not to go get them right away.
Wow.
So I was phone free for 4 hours.
Was the initial feeling like Oh my gosh, like you felt like panicked a little?
I did feel
Yeah.
a little panicked, and then it was like, well, I do have 2 laptops.
Yeah.
So, I was still able to communicate with people. I did everything, and it was kind of like I was like, "Okay, now what would it actually have been like to be out of communication with people for 4 hours?"
Yeah.
That would have been a real test. The computers can both text, so, like, it wasn't really an issue,
Right. Well, it is
but
thinking,
it called my attention to it.
yes.
Yeah.
And like it's interesting because, I still wear an Apple Watch, so it's like, okay, if I stop to really think, I have that, or my computer's a Mac, I have that, like, so I
Mhm.
can text, to your point. So,
Right.
but it is telling, right? And when we go back to the word addiction, it has this negative word, but and the weight to it, but the reality is we're all addicted to, and it could
Yeah.
be sugar, okay, it
Right.
could be
Oh, yeah. Like,
caffeine.
yeah. Mhm.
It doesn't have to be alcohol, and alcohol's scary because of the stigmas around it. And to your point, part of my talk was removing stigmas and just continuing to what I call open the kimono and just say, here's my story, here's how I
Right.
look at it. I hope this inspires others to reduce the shame,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's very true.
so yeah, we met at TEDx Kalamazoo, which
Mhm.
was back in October. We're recording this right now in March, but our TEDx talks just got published not even 3 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Right. Mhm.
So we had to wait 4 months for them to be published. What was that like for you to wait? Did it bother you?
Um, I was pretty good at being patient with it. The people around me were like, "When can we watch it? When can we watch it? When can we watch it?" I was
Yeah.
like, "Not yet. Not yet. Not yet."
Did you tell me about your story around applying for it? Because I learned from the group, we all kind of we
Mhm.
were backstage together, like to go through this experience
Yeah.
individually, yet together you form a bond in a very short period of time because this is no joke, like doing a TED Talk.
Yeah.
So, what was the application process like for you? Was this on your bucket list?
I had honestly kinda like, who doesn't want to give a TED Talk? Heck yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but this happened because a friend of mine reached out and said, "My friend is organizing this TED event, and I think you'd be a great speaker. Can I give him your name?" And I was like, "Oh, well, sure." And she didn't have any idea what I might talk about. She didn't tell me what she thought I might talk about. So I sat down and had coffee with Lem, and we're like, wow, what's this all about? And what is it that I have to say? And we tossed around a couple different topics, and this is where we landed, although it's not quite where we landed because once I started writing, it shifted. It was still about grief, but the focus shifted once I
Yeah.
really got to figuring out what is it that I have to say about this that's not what somebody else has already said.
Right, because not that anyone couldn't tell by your bio, but grief was the topic, and that's what you're an expert in, at least for what we're going to talk about and what your TED Talk was about. Um, what was the process like for you? Because there are a lot of people, and I'm sure they've reached out to you too, that are interested in like, what's the, because it wasn't on my radar. I didn't know you apply for these things. I listened to TED
Right.
Talks.
Yeah.
I thought people just literally walked on stage and just start talking because they're that good of orators. You and I
Yes.
both know that that is not the case, and how TED
Mhm.
provides coaches and help with writing
Mhm.
and all this stuff, like rehearsal time.
Masterclass
Yeah,
was
masterclass,
amazing.
all
Mhm.
that.
That's amazing.
So, what was that process like for you from July until October? We found out in July, and then we hit the stage in October.
Um, so there was a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Even though I have a background as a preacher, I'm used to standing up in front of people and talking, but I always have my whole text right in front of me. So it's an entirely different sort of thing to think about talking extemporaneously. And as I said, my topic changed. I started writing and I realized I was sort of writing a um, a research paper.
Mm.
And that was not what I had to say about grief. And even when I started telling my story, then I would like put all this framework in that was around other texts that I've read around grief. And again, the writing coach, like her feedback was, um, I watched all the top TED Talks on grief, and the first one, you just summarized their whole thing. And I was like, oh, I read
Ooh.
their book, but yeah, I didn't know, okay, what is it? What is my thing to say? What do I have to say about this? And that really pushed me into a different place,
Mm-hmm.
figure out what that was. And what I had really learned from this process, which honestly, my dad died when I was 19. That's 34 years ago. I had not truly dug into it this deeply before to really figure out what I had learned.
Did it bring up, like, even though it'd been 34 years, did the rawness of the initial loss resurface as you were doing this work?
Not the rawness.
Okay. What did come up?
Um, Pulling up additional memories, trying to remember that time. I mean, I've certainly spent time remembering my dad, but trying to remember my grieving process and what order things went in, what I was actually feeling, what I was aware of as at the time. I mean, I knew I had done things like I was in college when he died. I was studying religion, and every paper I wrote, I was halfway through when he died. Every paper I wrote for the rest of my time in college, almost every one had to do with death and dying and beliefs in different cultures, different religions, all this. Like that's all I did. That's what I wrote about. That's what I studied whenever I had the choice of topic.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
hmm So so remembering all those pieces and then trying to make sense of um, okay, I got through it. I'm at a very different place now than I was then. What did I learn in that process? And that reflection was really new.
So right, you lead workshops on grief, and
hmm
well, I don't want to assume, I try not to assume, but you had other, because of the TED Talk, you were able to go to a different place and pull out new learnings. Do you weave that into your teachings now
Oh
based
yeah.
on that experience just last fall?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's
Absolutely.
what would you say is some of the differences that you've added in since prepping and executing a TED Talk to your workshops about grief?
This whole understanding around um, grief is our response to grief is a stress response. And our, our most common understood stress responses are fight and flight. And and we respond to grief. We respond to our emotional stresses the same way we do to physical stressors with fight or flight or freeze. But then there are these other possibilities of tend and befriend. And so bringing that in, acknowledging that this is a stress and we respond with these things. But what happens if we consciously try to change our response um, without telling people this is how you need to do it or this is a better way to do it? Grief, like grief is so individual. It's different for every person. The way it ebbs and flows in your life after a major loss is going to be totally unique. And if we can approach it with curiosity and asking it what it has to offer us, instead of being scared of it and pushing it away, that's what I'm bringing a lot more. That possibility of approaching it in a different way and letting our nervous system calm down.
Hmm.
And if we can calm down our nervous system and be more present to what's happening, what really happens is that the emotions can come, but then they can also flow away. Because when we're in this fight or flight, we're just like defending ourselves. But when we can release into tend and befriend, things, it doesn't mean that all those emotions come and they just stay there forever. When they're acknowledged and seen and tended, then they flow away as well. And it becomes this more natural ebb and flow.
Yeah. So for in full candor for everyone that, Jill and I had to reschedule this interview 3 times, I think, at least. And it was because my mom was dying. And so I get her on my calendar and then I'm like, and my parents live here locally. So, and because my brother lives in South Carolina, it's just me here. So I was being pulled, right?
Yeah,
Because my mom
yeah,
was in a nursing home. And Jill and I had talked about my mom last fall when we met because I was very drawn to her talk and I watched the rehearsal, but I couldn't bring myself to watch it that evening because of the nerves and because my dad was in the audience, but I had to keep my headspace as you,
right, right.
I had to, and I was the closer.
Yep.
And by the way, I told Lem, the organizer, I'm like, is that because my last name is Will and alphabetically this is how you said no, but that was a lot of pressure,
Yeah,
that a compliment, but I was anyway. So I didn't watch your talk that day because I was like, I got to keep it right.
yeah,
Now,
right.
the last time we canceled my mom and rescheduled, my mom did pass away.
Yeah.
It's been almost 5 weeks now. And I emailed Jill, I think I emailed you like within a week and said, I really want to get this rescheduled because I am in it right now. And I like to come to my podcast authentic, raw, whatever. Like
Mhm.
I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not.
Yeah.
So I say all that to what you just described, the ebb and the flow, is
Mhm.
exactly how I'm feeling. But people would tell me things like, you might feel relief. Like, don't be surprised, Tony, if you feel relief once she passes. So she
Mhm.
passes, and I was in the room, my dad was in the room, my husband was in the room. And then days following, I didn't feel any relief. Right. So this is an example of what you're talking about. And people say some funny stuff. They,
Oh boy. People
so,
say so many things because we're so uncomfortable. The weirdest things come out of our mouths when we're around people who are experiencing grief.
oh, and I was not upset, but I was more like aware, like, Tony, they're just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They don't know what to say to you. So what do you say to someone who is questioning right now as they're listening to us talk, going, am I that person that says something that I,
I mean, honestly, I'm sure I'm that person too.
Mhm.
Because our natural instinct is to say, oh my gosh, Tony, I'm so sorry. That sounds awful.
Yeah,
Well, when you say that to a person, they're like, oh, I better feel awful.
right.
And they might feel awful, but telling them that they feel awful doesn't actually help.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, um, and sometimes even asking, how are you? We say that, and I do it all the time. I do it
same.
all the time. That's a lot to ask for of a grieving person. Do you actually want to know how they are? Boy, you might not really want to.
Well, when
It
my
might
mom,
not be the right setting for that conversation.
yeah.
Um, so asking even that thing that comes out of the most genuine care is not necessarily the most helpful for the person who's grieving. Um, yeah.
So when my mom was, when we were because you never know in the end, like
Mhm.
until you're really at the end
Right.
with modeling and just some of the things that happen to the body and the heart rate and the breathing. And I mean, at the very end,
Yeah.
you don't really know it's going to be all this. At least that was and my mom, just in case anyone's unaware, she passed away from Alzheimer's. So, but I would walk into the office and my staff is fabulous. So they're like, Tony, how are you? I'm like, I'm terrible. I'm grumpy. And how's your mom? And my response was dying. And I'm like, I felt I felt a little bad, but I'm like, and because I'm so blunt, but I'm like, that's what's happening. And that's why I'm grumpy. And I was just trying to like figure this out. It was, and there's no figuring it out. Right. And I want to come back to this tend and befriend because it's not just after the person passes, because I feel like I was trying to tend and befriend before too. So
Yeah,
is that safe to make that connection?
absolutely. I mean, I think that there are many situations in which we know a death is coming. Alzheimer's is a particular one in which you have losses over years, and you are allowed to grieve those individual losses. The point at which the person can't do this thing for themselves anymore, when they can't share this memory with you anymore, when they don't know who you are anymore. Those are enormous losses that you are already grieving while they are still alive.
Hmm.
And so you have been in a grief process for years. And then the body dies, and it's a helpful marker in a lot of ways. Um, and there may be relief from some of the stress of caregiving
Hmm.
and of not knowing what's going to happen next. Um, and it's a furthering, and it's a that grief process has a little more concreteness to it. You get to have a funeral or memorial service,
Hmm.
and that public marking helps your whole being know that she has changed state from a current presence in your life to a past presence in your life.
Hmm. 100%.
Yeah.
And as you describe it, and it's so close, like the funeral was just less than 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
It felt like that. Like, and it was a beautiful day. It was sunny. It was blue skies. And it was at the end of February, right? So most of our days in winter in Michigan are not sunny blue skies.
Right.
So I see that as just a sign, right? And it was closure. It did help me because and this leads me to my next question. So losing my mom and I share DNA obviously because I came from her,
Mhm.
and I study epigenetics as part of my like I just love to learn about the brain and
Yeah.
trauma and all these things similar
Right.
to kind of some of the stuff I talked about in my TED Talk, but which isn't any of those things I talked about. For those of you who are like, oh, you did what too? I did. I talked about being a minority in sports and living alcohol free, tied to my 6 leadership pillars. But epigenetics, I find interesting because I literally, Jill, felt like a part of me like died without sounding, I hope I might sound crazy, but I think it's that mother daughter, or because I came from her. I don't know. Maybe you can explain it, but I felt a difference like in me. Is that
Yeah.
normal?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that I've heard anyone say it in that specific way, but it makes complete sense. Makes complete sense to me. Um, I mean, as you noted, like your identity as a daughter is there's a way in which that died,
Hmm.
right? Because your mother is no longer living in this world.
Hmm. Yes.
And so there's a piece of that relationship died, and that relationship is part of you. And so yeah, something is gone. Something is changed and will never be the same.
Yeah, and it was weird to say, like, I don't have a mom now. No, I have a mom, but she's passed, but it's weird that I don't. And you're right, there was a lot of what I guess the textbook term is anticipatory grief, or, because there were small, like she stopped calling me, I don't know, 3 years ago and texting me because she didn't know how to use the phone anymore. So
Mhm.
I got to like, it kind of in my mind, like eased me in to,
Mhm.
because you start, but then there's some of it. And we were lucky. She always remembered like me, my dad, my brother, um,
Amazing.
my
Yeah.
kids. So she never forgot any of us.
Uh-huh.
I will say this, she was a good faker though. And I'd always call her out on
Yeah.
certain people. I'm like, Mom, are you faking? She goes, yeah.
Uh-huh. That's awesome.
It was pretty funny because she would own it. But yeah, so it's just like so tell me, is there when you talk about grief, is there a difference between the grief we have with a parent than a spouse or a child? Some of that those immediate family members versus like to me there's different ones, like maybe even a grandparent one layer out, because I've lost people before, but this felt different. So how do you talk through those different people in our lives who pass, and depending on what age they are, because if you lose a
Mhm.
child, that's way different than a grandparent. And so I don't know.
Right.
It's a big question. So take it for wherever.
Yeah. They talk about all of those different factors as mediators of mourning. So they're all different things that mediate, impact how we mourn. Um, yeah, both of my grandparents, all three of my four grandparents died well into their 90s, 90, 93, and 97.
Good for them.
Did I miss them when they died? Sure. Was it traumatic? No. Like it was their time. It was fine. It was fine.
Mhm.
Um, that was more impactful for my mom, who was closer, right? Because she has lost her parents. That's a different thing than me losing my very old grandparents.
Right.
We had we had a lovely relationship. Um, so the intensity of the relationship with a person can have a big impact on it. Some people who die, we might have a conflicted relationship with them and they die. It's like more complicated to mourn a person you had a conflicted relationship with than one you had a beautiful, perfect, loving relationship.
Hmm.
Because we all expect to feel sad and to miss the person. We're less comfortable with feeling angry, with knowing you've lost the chance to repair.
Hmm.
That chance is now over and will never come again. Which, while they were alive, there's always that, even if you had no intention of it, there's always that hope. Maybe this will change at some point.
Hmm.
So that is another mediator of mourning, how connected we were with the person, what type of connection that was. All of these things can impact it. And at the same time, like grief is grief. And and we all um, kind of need to do the same types of work to work through that grief. Some losses, we may work through that more easily and more quickly than with other losses. But it's kind of all the same stuff.
What is your advice what are the first steps in starting to work through grief?
Mhm. My first step is naming it.
Mhm.
And naming, so when a person, so you, and we talked about this a little bit already, you've lost your mom. Another thing you've lost is a part of your identity in your relationship with her.
Mhm.
At some point, you lost the person who called you up and said, "How are you?" All of these are different parts of what we lose when we lose someone. And naming those things and acknowledging them is a really powerful part of the grief process. Because when we put a name to it, it makes it more real for us. And we can kind of accept that thing, it works. It's part of our process of accepting that is gone.
Yeah. So speaking of naming, this is
Mhm.
something that so last, it was like a week or two ago because we're in the middle of hockey season for the K-Wings, and I'm sitting at the game, and my husband's sitting next to me, and I'm crying,
Mhm.
and he goes, what's wrong? And I just said, I have sad throat. And he goes, what's sad throat? And
Mhm.
I said, well, I'm thinking about my mom. I don't know what came up, but I was thinking about my mom.
Mhm.
And I said, my throat's sad, and that's where I feel it. And so I labeled it sad
Yeah.
throat. And
Yes.
he looked at me, and he's a jokester, we both, and he goes, he giggled, and he goes, that's actually really good. And I said, yeah. So that's a way of labeling
Mhm.
something.
Yes.
So now I
So
literally
there's
say, I have sad throat.
yeah, so there's naming the losses and then there's naming the emotions and the feelings and experiences we're having, which again, when you name it, when you name sad throat, when you name resentment, those things have less mystery if you name it. And things that we can understand are less scary. So if we have names for it, we're less scared of it, even if it's a big, hard thing. If we could name
100%.
it, it's less scary.
And you can file it in your brain. I always say this when I'm coaching clients. It can go on its little shelf, right? Like, not, I mean, I guess maybe it's a form of compartmentalization, but at least it has a spot. It's not just this thing that's floating out there.
Right, right. It helps give it shape and you
Yes.
can recognize it. And then you can also start to interact with it. You can start to talk to your sad throat and be like, wow, sad throat, like what activates you?
Mm.
Um, what do you need? How long do you want to hang out? Those are all like we can start to interact with it. And uh, again, like one of the things that that does, and this is such a powerful thing, is separates us from the feeling. Um, I read recently in Gaelic, you don't the syntax doesn't say I'm sad, it says sadness is upon me. And disidentifying, not I am sad, but there's this sadness that has come over me. Well, that means the sadness might lift. The sadness might do various things. I am not sadness.
Right.
It is a little bit separate from me.
It
And
makes,
that it helps us, again, have that looser relationship so that it can ebb and flow.
well, and it also allows you not to sit in the victim of it, right?
Yeah, right,
That label, because that can be tricky, right? There are times when we're victim of things, but that is not a great space, in my opinion, to
right.
live
It's
in.
not. Yeah, yeah.
It's not a good mindset. So if you can separate yourself from,
Mhm.
I'm not sadness, quite frankly, that's way too big of a like, I'm not that powerful, right? Like I'm Tony and I'm sad because my mom died, but that's not who I am.
Yeah, right,
Oh, I
right.
love it. And I love what you said about sad throat, which is, hey, sad throat, what brought you here? You
Hmm.
know, like how long you hanging out? That's a tool I'm totally going to use.
Yeah.
And I did know because I love to observe myself to become an observer because sad throat came back the other night, but I noticed it was after a very long day and I was tired. So
Hmm.
my battery was drained, which is
Yeah.
normal. Throughout the day, we get tired, we drain
Uh-huh.
and we go to sleep and recharge and off we go the next day. And so
Yeah.
it's just noting that, like, and it's okay. I just sat there and cried and
Right. Sad throat had some stuff that wanted to come out, and
yeah.
it needed some space to do that. And so that's another really important tool in working through our grief is letting it have some space. And when you let it have some space, you can also have boundaries with it and tell it, not right now, thanks. I'll get to
Mm.
you later.
And
But
that's
if you
okay. You're
never give
saying
it
that's okay.
I'm saying that's okay. If
Okay.
you also plan to give it space, if you never give it space, it's going to come up in ways that you really don't like and that aren't very pleasant. And although crying and feeling sorrowful isn't super pleasant, um,
Hmm.
it's better than rage or total despair or becoming not functional.
Yeah.
So if we give it space, and then we can also say, not right now, later, that's a lot more useful than being, I just not going anywhere near that.
Do you, I just wrote down timeline and 1 year rule. So it might be a two-part question because
Mhm,
people are like, I coach clients that have had loss, but my clients that I coach are working to reduce substances, remove alcohol, things like that.
mhm.
And they're like, they may have had a loss, and they're like, I feel like I should, like, this isn't still relevant. Why am I still grieving? And I'm always like, my response is this: grief doesn't have a timeline. So I want to hear your input on that. And then I also would love for you to give me insight on what I wrote down as the 1 year rule, because this is still with time, but like, once you have a major loss, is this a real thing or is it folklore? Like, don't make any giant decisions in the first year post loss. Like, I've heard a lot of people that have had a parent die or a loved one die that they were the caretaker, they just quit their job, or they, like they do big, or they sell their house and move, or
Uh,
big stuff. So two
yeah,
parts, but all about time.
sure. Okay. So the first part, how long is grief? The grief literature defines early grief as the first 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And so after 6 months, our friends are kind of tired of us talking about our loss, and they're like, "Are you not done yet?
Yes.
Are you not ready to get on with life yet? If it's a spouse, are you not ready to date yet?"
Mhm.
Um, and they may or may not be. Everyone's different, but early grief is the first 2 years.
Okay.
And we tell our clients in our grief groups the terrible news that the second year is often harder than the first year. Because when you've lost a spouse or a parent or a child, your first year is dealing with details,
Mhm.
getting rid of stuff, surviving, getting through the first everything, the first birthday, the first holiday, the first anniversary. And then the second year comes and they're still dead
Mhm.
and you're still so sad. And everyone else has moved on because it's been a year. and and all that's left is all the emotions. All the other stuff has kind of been resolved.
Mhm.
And it's hard. And you're less, the first year is also full of brain fog.
Mm.
And so people often aren't fully aware even of what they're experiencing. And you mentioned like not really remembering that first week.
Yeah, I didn't.
Very common. And having some level of brain fog for months to a year, very common,
Mm.
very common. And so the second year hits and you're clearer and you're like, oh, wow. Well, it like all hits in a new way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think having a lot of grace for yourself and for your friends and family members, having grace for others who are grieving, there is no time frame,
Okay.
and it's much longer than we think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because of living alcohol free, or I mean, I can interchange that word with sobriety too. It doesn't bother me either one, but that's often what we say in those circles too, right? Because that's about grief in a different way.
Absolutely.
And in your bio, yeah, I
Yes.
mean, you're grieving the loss of the substance in your life that we make it mean something more than it really is
Yes.
healthy.
Yes.
And so those
And
first,
it's your coping mechanism.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting with grief as it relates to drugs or alcohol, and I always like to point this out, alcohol is a drug. How it got separated out, I don't know, but I always like
Got
to,
legalized. So
yeah, there you go. There you go. That's it. But I mean, when you're grieving and then like coping healthy. Like there were moments, and I'm very early in, right? And I'm like, alcohol wasn't even on the radar because I don't mess with that anymore. Like it's done. And I'm not oversimplifying it. It was a lot of work, but I'm almost 5 years.
Mhm.
But the first 2 years is the same way, like early sobriety, like it's fragile is the word
Right.
I like to use. It's
Yeah.
fragile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that's scary to people because now with grief, and you say early grief, 2 years, I'm like, holy cow, that's a long time.
Right. Right.
But it goes by fast. So the one
What
year
was the
rule.
sec Yeah, the 1 year. What's the 1 year rule?
So they
Oh, don't making decisions, making decisions.
yes.
You know, again, so many mediators of that advice. Um, my mom cared for a partner with Parkinson's disease for several years before she died, and within less than a year, she had sold her house and moved from Wisconsin here to Kalamazoo and bought a house right next door to me. We'd renovated that whole house. Like we started this, I mean, like we bought the house and done all those renovations to it. It had had nothing done to it since it was built in the 50s.
Oh,
Single
wow.
owner house. Um, we did all of that and she was here in like 11 months after her partner died. But it had all been kind of in the works
Mhm.
because of the length of her partner's decline. She knew it was coming. And she thought about, do I want to stay in Milwaukee or leave? Do I want to move to where one of my kids lives? What do I want to do when that time comes?
Mhm.
And so, although we didn't make any decisions before Lilo died, there were conversations, there was thinking. And so, once it happened, we did move pretty fast. Um, if it had been sudden, I would definitely have advised slower. It's
Yes.
so there's I don't there's no there's again no hard and fast rule. Um, but it is useful to be mindful of, am I running away from this or am I making a conscious choice to move forward in my life?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
quitting the job and selling the house and moving away can might sound like I can't know because I don't know the context. It could be running away.
Hmm.
And I'm just not even going to be in that situation anymore. I can't handle it. Or it could be, I have always wanted to do these things and I got an inheritance and I'm able to do this now and I'm doing it. I'm going to seize life because you never know how much time you have.
Right. Well,
I can't say which it was. I don't know.
it changes you. Like when
Yes.
you and it depends on the person, of course. And people don't like that answer. I think sometimes because we want like concrete, like this. But the reality is, it does change you depending on if the loss was sudden or if it was long term. If you I think, and this is just me, I was in the room and literally watched her slowly pass, and
Mhm,
it wasn't this like not what you see in the movies,
mhm,
at least my mom's experience. So that being there changed me because I wanted to be there. My brother did not.
mhm.
And because everyone's different,
Yeah,
and that's okay. But if
yeah.
fundamentally I looked at life very differently because I watched my dad, he's still living, he's turning 82 next week, very healthy. I'm
Mhm.
playing softball still. We joke like he's going to be on the 85U team
Yep,
because they're going to pull him up, even though he's only 82,
yep,
only 82, which we
yeah.
love about. But like living, like what he is, like he lives on the memories they built. There was a lot of like, remember when and all this because that's what you have at the end.
Mhm, mhm,
Right. And so it fundamentally changed how I look at things going
mhm.
through this experience.
Yeah, yeah.
in a positive way. Like I'm already thinking, like I'm like making decisions and I look at it differently. So grief isn't all doom and gloom. I mean, it
Right.
stinks, but it's normal. Like I want to outlive my parents
Yes, heck yeah. Right.
and I want my kids to outlive me.
Hmm.
Now, the reality is it still hurts and it's a loss, but
Right.
it is they're older than me.
Hmm.
That's how
Yeah.
it should work.
Right. And the purpose of grief isn't to make us feel bad, right? The purpose of grief is to help us adapt to the new
Oh,
reality.
I love that.
And processing our memories and our feelings is part of how we adapt to the new reality.
Hmm.
And being changed and making different kinds of decisions is part of how we adapt to the new reality. Because the reality is we will never be who we were before this experience. There's no going back.
Right.
Purpose of grief isn't to get back to where we were. It's to figure out how do we move forward in this new reality?
Yeah. Uh,
How do we find health and happiness here now alongside the sadness? Can we let sadness live and also let happiness live? Can those can they be neighbors? Heck yeah.
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 You don't have to be just one thing. That to me fall and if I'm that goes into tend and befriend,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right.
it's not you're not just one thing. You can be happy and sad all at the same
Hmm.
time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Tell me like with grief resources. So if someone's anticipating loss, in a loss, about ready, whatever,
Yep.
what resources, one, do you provide? Or if
Mhm.
someone's listening and they're not in Kalamazoo, or
Sure.
maybe some of your stuff is virtual, I don't know, but talk to me about the resources out there for people. What do you recommend?
Sure. Sure. If people are interested, so first I'll say the majority of people, grief is a normal and natural process. The majority of people work through this adaptive process on their own or with the support of friends and family with no additional professional support. And some of us really benefit from some additional professional support. That might take the form of individual therapy or coaching. Um, and with me, that can happen virtually anywhere. So wherever you are, that's a conversation that can be had about working one-on-one to to work through those processes of grief and to work on some of the more complicated stuff. That's often really helpful for people who had more complicated relationships with their person who died.
Okay.
Um, Groups seem especially helpful for people who are grieving because so much of what we experience when we grieve is am I doing this right? Am I losing my mind? Um, is this normal? Shouldn't I be feeling better by now? And no one else wants to talk about this because when I talk about how I'm feeling, they kind of freak out and they try to fix it.
Hmm.
So finding people, and this is essential, whether it's a support group or whether it's a friend, finding someone who can hear and receive your story, who is not afraid of your grief.
Mm.
Groups can be a beautiful place for that. Um, Seeking out support, one can Google grief coach, grief counselor, find resources in the area. Also, all hospices are mandated to provide some kind of grief support
Hmm.
and to the community. This is part of the Medicare mandate that pays for hospice. Nonprofit hospices often provide lots of groups and mostly groups free to the community.
Hmm.
So wherever you are, finding the hospices near you and looking at what their grief support resources are. They'll all have articles and newsletters and information. Some will have in-person groups, some will have virtual groups. All of these are offered to the public, and so I work part-time for a hospice and part-time for myself. And working in the hospice and being able to offer these services to people for free is I just love, I can just go out in the community and say, we have this for you.
Mhm.
Come. Just come. Just come. We're available for everyone.
Yeah. It's so, I learned a lot about hospice. I learned a lot about palliative care. I
Mhm.
learned a lot about memory care facilities. I
Yes.
learned a lot about Alzheimer's. I learned a lot about the brain. And it was, and I'm a curious person. I love to learn.
Mhm.
So when I looked at that side of it, it was, like to be able to learn all these things. Because before this, I didn't know I didn't know what palliative care was. I
Mhm.
thought you just leapfrogged right to hospice.
Mhm.
And in a lot of cases, you don't. And
Mhm.
so I learned a lot. And I learned like, one of the things I said towards the end, when I could tell, like I could feel certain things when I would spend time with my mom. It started out twice a week, then three, and then every day. And I could just feel it. I'm like, look at her, and I'm like, I could tell. So I'd go to talk to the hospice nurse, and I just said, I'm not asking, I'm advocating. I can
Mhm.
tell. And she was like, you're not wrong, Tony.
Mhm.
And so I learned how to advocate in a kind way because
Mhm.
like I think I had a lot of empathy for hospice care workers and all the staff that worked at Brookdale, which is where my mom
Mhm.
was, because it's like you're supposed to know, like be a crystal ball reader too, and be able to tell us who want to know all the things. It's not an easy job. And like I'd be terrible at it because I'm too like intense and like and you're so calm and
Yeah.
serene and peaceful. So I have a lot of admiration for that work because it's not for everyone.
No, right. Right. I wouldn't want your job either. So, works out well that way. We're all built for different things.
You don't want to run a hockey team?
No.
I know. It's just I loved the learning process of it, and all at the same time watching someone die is it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy. And
Oh
I
yeah.
know what I would want when it's my turn, and hospice was just did such a great job. And our caseworker was at my mom's
Mhm. Yep.
celebration of life, and that meant a lot to
Yeah.
me and my dad. And
Mhm.
and so I just kudos to everyone that works in that space.
Mhm. Yeah. They're amazing people.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Jill, if people want to connect with you specifically, they want to watch your TED Talk, they want to work with you, they want to look at like all things
Yep.
Jill, where do they go?
Anbaucoaching.com. Anbau coaching.com. Sorry. Anbau means cultivate in German.
I wondered what that meant.
Yeah. So Anbau is all about cultivating new things in our lives, and working through the grief and change process. So anbaucoaching.com.
Okay. And is your TED Talk on your
The
website?
TED Talk is on my website.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Or you could say Google me.
You can also Google, like on YouTube, you put in Jill Terwilliger, there's only one video. There it is.
Right. Yeah. I know. I always am like, you could Google me, but I feel like such a jerk when I say that. But yeah, I put my TED Talk on my website too. So it's been such an honor for us to finally get to have this conversation. And I always believe people are brought into my life for a reason. And I have no doubt that we were on that same stage for a reason back.
Well, and it's very special to be able to have this conversation now at this point in your life, and with all the delays that we had, it's it's really beautiful timing.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this and being so patient while I was navigating what was
Uh,
this experience. And
yeah.
you're so helpful to everyone listening to this. So if anyone is looking to connect with me, you know where to find Jill now. If you need to find me, anything hockey, kwings.com, anything lifestyle coaching, mindfulnesselevated.com, professional development coaching, TonyWill.com. I am on Facebook and LinkedIn at Tony Lentini Will, and on Instagram at I'm Tony Will. And until next time.